standing almost 20 feet tall. It has a massive jaw, powerful leg muscles, and huge flesh-ripping teeth. It is commonly believed that T. Rex was the ultimate predator, but that would depend largely on how fast he ran. And this is the test Dino Lab is conducting today. To provide expert support for this experiment, we have called in 3 giants in the field of paleontology: Dr. Ryosuke Motani, Professor Kent Stevens, and Dr. Hans Larsen.
I think that Tyrannosaurus Rex is the most fascinating dinosaur and the most popular dinosaur of all time, and will be for a long time to come, because it's the largest carnivorous dinosaur that we have. There are 2 or 3 contenders, but it's certainly one of the largest. It's one of the oldest known dinosaurs as well. It was named in 1905, so now more than 100 years old. Plus, children's imaginations makes T. Rex the most popular dinosaur.
Knowing the top speed of T. Rex is important, because if it ran at only 10 to 15 miles per hour, about as fast as an elephant, there's no way it could have been the deadly hunter we imagine. So, to find out how fast T. Rex could run, we first need to know how much it weighed.
So here we have a femur, an upper leg bone of a T. Rex.
Left side, right.
From the left side, right. And the femur is nice because it gives us an idea as to what kinds of forces were going on in this animal, because it only walked on 2 legs. So at one point, 1 foot is off the ground, and the entire weight of the animal is sitting on this bone.
Yes.
Which is really a fantastic piece of information, because now we can look at bone circumference, like the whole diameter around here, which I can't even touch my fingers around to give you an idea how big this thing is.
In fact, it's more than its weight. When it strikes the ground, there's even more force than its mass coming back on up.
So every step this guy is taking, he's not only putting down all his weight on one leg, but the downward momentum of his weight on his leg. So there's really a lot of forces going on here. And we can get an idea for some of the forces just by looking at some of these muscle scars here. So here's a really rugose region where a really big muscle was inserting onto this bone.
So coming up over the knee.
Yeah, so in the size of this insertion and the kind of remodeling that the bone is doing around the muscle gives us an indication that there's lots of forces going on here.
Yes.
Judging by the thickness of the bones and the huge size of the skeleton, T. Rex should have weighed at least 6 or 7 tons. If that's the case, this heavyweight could not have been the speedy predator we've seen in so many movies. Instead of being the king of the prehistoric jungle, like the modern lion, it would have been a scavenger of dead carcasses, like a hyena. Dino Lab is going to examine this dinosaur in an entirely new way to find out once and for all how fast T. Rex could run.
Run up the treadmill, come on!
Was it the fleet-footed predator of our imagination, or just a big, dumb scavenger of leftovers? Using a specially designed king-size treadmill, John and his team will clinically measure if the Roadrunner from Hell deserves its nickname.
Really slow at first. Really slow. 5 kilometers. Right. 5 location.
So how fast was this guy, do you think?
Well, that's the tricky question, because a lot of the estimates of, let's say, mass or speed are really based on the same kinds of values, like the circumference of the femur, for instance. And so it becomes a circular argument if we start trying to talk about the two together. So we have to find a way to tease them apart, and which has been the topic of research for many decades.
The biggest land animals today, the elephants, weigh up to 5 tons and also have huge leg muscles, but they can only reach speeds of 10 to 15 miles per hour.
Okay, yeah, faster.
Some of the important reasons for wanting to know how fast, let's say, a Tyrannosaurus Rex could run have implications far beyond just physiology. If we think of some modern reptiles today, they can really go at high speeds, but only for a very short, sustained period of time. If things like a Tyrannosaurus Rex could run at high speed and at sustained rates. This gives us a window into how much food these kinds of animals would require. The difference is an order of magnitude. If it were cold-blooded with capabilities of doing short, fast burst speeds, it would, let's say, eat X number of pounds of meat per day. If it were highly endothermic, so warm-blooded, and doing the same thing, it would be 10x the amount of meat per day, which is, if we do the math up now, from how many pounds of meat a T-Rex would have to eat, if it were cold-blooded versus warm-blooded, is we're approaching eating an elephant a day.
Okay. Yeah.
If T-Rex needed to eat several tons of fresh meat every day, speed and endurance would have meant the difference between life or death.
15.
4 to 5 tons per day is a lot of meat. So the question we need to answer is, how could such a huge and heavy predator be so successful at running down its prey? It turns out that the T-Rex may have had a hidden advantage, one that paleontologists only recently discovered. By taking a much closer look at the T-Rex skeleton, scientists found that its bones are not solid, but riddled with holes. This type of bone structure is common in birds, which need to be light to fly, but totally surprising in a gigantic predator that needs to be strong to fight. And it makes a huge difference to how experts calculate the weight of T-Rex.
They used to grossly overestimate T-Rex, taking into consideration the fact that there was a lot of pneumaticity, a lot of hollow bones in the anterior skeleton, maybe not in the tail. Do you think those are still overestimates?
A lot of the estimates that we do for things like T-Rex are based on solid bones. Certainly you're right in taking out some of that mass by saying that there's air inside them. Right. I think that we could even go further and maybe take off 40% approximately in terms of total mass, not because of just air filling in many of the bones of the body, but also air fills in a lot of the body cavity.
So then if we drop down into the 3-ton range or so for a full adult T-Rex, what do you think the speed would have been?
If we were to drop the mass down to something more realistic, realistic along the theropod to bird evolution side, that we can probably, with confidence, say that they could run upwards of 25 miles per hour, no problem,
right,
and maybe even more. Some of the things that we have to take into account that have yet to be taken into account in terms of how fast a T-Rex could run are beyond computer models right now. Things like shock absorption, how much energy is stored within inside tendons or springs inside the body. If we look at the tails of T-Rex, they're very long. Half the length of the T-Rex is in the tail. The tail is also very stiff, with lots of muscles and tendons sheathing the outside of the tail, making it essentially a balancing organ. Now, if you put this thing on a treadmill and we watch how it runs, I would bet a lot of money that the tail is actually acting not only as a balancing organ, but as some kind of a force spring storage.
Very few other dinosaurs could have outrun T-Rex at this speed.
25. Watch out! Getting up! He did 25.
New discoveries show that the combination of a lighter body, along with a rigid tail that stores energy with every stride and then releases that energy like a spring, enabled T-Rex to run much faster than we previously thought. If T Rex could run fast enough to catch any other dinosaur that had the misfortune to cross his path, what defensive mechanisms and survival strategies did other dinos use to protect themselves from those flesh-ripping teeth? John and his team have been cleaning up the mess that our new T Rex made when it chewed up the power box, and they've made an interesting discovery.
If we look at the teeth here, this is something that this particular specimen shows quite nicely. This is one big scoop, and the teeth in the back are not sharp. They do have small serrations, but in life, if you were to run your fingers down the teeth, and if this animal could keep its mouth open long enough, you would be quite safe to rub your hand along it. So it wouldn't be cutting into your fingers.
Yes.
These are essentially railroad spikes, completely bone crushing. No other function, I think, for these. But when you look at the front teeth, and these are not quite as extreme as what they normally are, but they're very D-shaped or cup-shaped, and so this forms almost like a big ice, 1 gallon ice cream scoop. And so as these things are biting into something, God forbid, that this ice cream scoop arrangement of teeth is just literally scooping out meat and skin and organs, whereas the rest of the jaw is there for absolute crushing.
It's also an interesting thing to note that if the head is tilted down, so if the animal points its head down by about 10 degrees, then it maximizes how much of the horizon is seen binocularly. This can also be independently noted by looking at the semicircular canals in the vestibular system that would hold the head in a neutral, balanced position. So all of this specialization, the narrow snout, the large eyes, the frontal vision, is far more than what would be needed for scavenging. And it's also much more than what would be needed by a crocodile to simply judge the distance to prey. So it looks like it was giving a panoramic vision, perhaps by scanning around, without giving itself away by large body movements. It could decide the lay of the land and where the prey were in front of the animal.
It is clear that